All right, so you're the kind of person who wants to get right to it, right? Like you want the core, the substance of things without all the fluff,
Absolutely.
right? And that's kind of what we try to do here, right? So today we're going to dive deep into something pretty disturbing, actually. This happened in Dallas, Texas, early morning shooting at Iani's Restaurant and Club. And this was back on June 29, 1984.
Wow.
So kind of a while back, and we've looked at, we've got some contemporary news reports. We've got a book that really gets into this case, just to pull out like what are the crucial things that happened here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I guess our goal here is to kind of walk through, what happened, what was the immediate aftermath, but then also there's some really interesting kind of broader issues that this whole tragedy kind of brought up, not only for Texas, but for the whole country.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I find so fascinating about this case is that this is not just about the crime itself, right?
Right.
It's about the context in which it happened and, kind of the really profound changes that it brought about. We were talking about changes to how Texas handles the death penalty and even how the country looks at immigration, who it allows within its borders.
Right. So an argument in a nightclub actually ended up leading to some pretty huge changes in the law.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so let's get right into it then. So we're talking just after midnight, 15 minutes after midnight on June 29th, 1984 at Iani's. And things take a really, really dark turn. There was a man there named Abdelkrim Belakeb, and he got into an argument with a woman on the dance floor.
Okay.
And it escalated to the point where she actually pushed him away. And according to the sources, she used a racial slur against him, calling him a monkey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So really, really intense. And you would think, that would be the point where things really exploded. But Balashev's immediate reaction is actually kind of surprising.
Really?
He reportedly blew her a kiss and then just walked out of the bar.
So just walked away.
Yeah, almost as if he was like composing himself before intentionally like escalating the situation.
Right, like he was taking a moment to decide what he was going to do.
Yeah, and as we'll see, that calm didn't last. He went to his car and got a Smith & Wesson .459 handgun.
Oh, gosh.
Came back into the bar, and he approached the woman and said in a very deliberate way, "I've had enough with you," and then shot her point blank.
Oh, my gosh.
But the horror didn't end there.
Oh, no.
He then went on to shoot 4 other people at the bar.
He just, went on a rampage.
Yeah, then he actually left the bar again, went outside, came right back in, and shot and killed another man.
It's like he was making sure he got as many people as he could.
Yeah, and then as he finally fled from the bar, he shot a 7th person.
Oh, wow.
And it's important to note that 3 of the 6 people who died were shot in the head at close range.
Execution style.
Yeah, exactly.
And
He even fired a shot at an employee who was outside.
just a complete disregard for human life.
Yeah, and throughout all of this, witnesses consistently described Balakeb as being calm.
So chilling.
I know, it's hard to imagine that level of brutality and coldness.
And it makes you wonder what was going on in his mind, right? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of mental state could lead to that kind of behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. So his escape attempt wasn't very successful. He crashed his car into a telephone pole pretty close to the club.
Okay.
But that ended up being his undoing because police were able to trace the car back to him, and within 2 hours they had apprehended him at a friend's house about 3 miles from the crash site.
Wow, so they caught him pretty quickly.
Yeah, so at Iani's, the aftermath was just devastating. 5 people died at the scene. The woman who he had initially argued with, she died on the way to the hospital.
Oh, gosh.
And one other person was seriously injured, but thankfully survived.
That's awful. It's just unimaginable what those people went through and their families.
Yeah, it's a horrible tragedy. So let's talk about Abdelkrim Belakeb himself for a moment.
Okay.
He was 39 years old, a Moroccan national living in the U.S. as a resident alien.
Okay, so he had legal status here.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And looking into his background, it paints a picture of a troubled individual even before he came to America.
Really?
Yeah, so he was born in Morocco in 1944, and even his own father described him as a problem child, always getting into fights. He was even corporally punished quite a bit, and his family actually moved to a different city, Fez, in an attempt to deal with his behavior.
Wow, so there were signs early on that something wasn't right.
Yeah, and it gets worse. In 1963, while he was in Casablanca, he stabbed a man during a fight.
Oh, my.
He actually skipped his trial for that and was never convicted.
He just fled.
Yeah, and then just 19 months later, he shows up in Europe and spends several years kind of moving around the continent.
Oh.
He got married to a Belgian woman. They had 2 children.
So he had a family.
Yeah, but his personal life was marked by infidelity, and he was violent towards his wife.
So the violence continued.
Yeah, and there was a particularly disturbing incident around his 35th birthday.
What happened?
He got angry because he thought there wasn't enough food to make the dinner he wanted.
Over food?
Yeah, he brutally beat his wife to the point where she almost died.
Oh my goodness.
And when his young daughter tried to stop him, he slapped her.
This is just awful.
His wife was hospitalized. She pressed charges against him and started divorce proceedings. And after a short stint in jail, he went back to Morocco, but almost immediately started trying to find a new country to live in.
Wow, so he was actively looking for a new place to go.
Yeah, and here's something really important. He was actually tried and convicted in absentia in Belgium for assaulting his wife and daughter.
So even though he wasn't there for the trial.
Right, and they sentenced him to 2 years in prison.
So at this point, he's a fugitive.
Exactly.
So how in the world did he get into the United States with this kind of background?
That's the big question, right? Despite being a convicted fugitive, he was able to come to the U.S. on a B-2 tourist visa.
A tourist visa.
Yeah, and it looks like he committed fraud on his application.
Like lied about his past?
Right, but it's hard to know for sure because after the Iran hostage crisis, the U.S. Embassy started destroying visa records after 1 year.
Oh, wow. So there's no way to go back and see what he actually said.
Exactly, but we do know that he claimed to have been rejected by several other countries. The Netherlands, Canada, Italy, Switzerland.
But the U.S. let him in.
Yeah, and there was a lot of finger pointing between the different U.S. agencies about how this happened.
So nobody wanted to take responsibility.
Exactly. So just to be clear, this B-2 tourist visa requires you to prove that you're not going to stay here permanently and you're not allowed to work.
Right.
He straight up lied to the consular officials. He said he'd been living in Morocco for the past 5 years, which is a requirement for that visa.
But he hadn't been.
Nope, he'd been in Belgium up until a month before he applied. And he also lied about his criminal history and any mental health issues.
But the Belgian authorities, they knew all about it.
Right.
They had records detailing 13 assaults, the beating of his wife, a child beating incident, 2 involuntary hospitalizations for mental health and alcoholism, 2 jail terms, and probation.
Yeah, and any of those things should have been a huge red flag.
Absolutely. It's mind-boggling how he slipped through the cracks.
So he got his visa in July of 1980, entered the U.S. in April of 1981,
Okay.
and immediately broke the terms of his visa by trying to get a job.
Of course he did.
And then in January of 1984, just a few months before the shooting, he married an American citizen.
Oh, so that gave him permanent residency.
Yep. And tragically, his violent behavior continued here. He would beat and threaten his wife.
So this pattern of abuse just kept going.
And his wife's testimony at his trial was really powerful. She said he was like a freight train out of control. And she talked about an argument they had just 10 days before the shooting where she told him she didn't want anything to do with him anymore.
So things were really bad between them.
Yeah, he was unemployed at the time of the shooting. He'd had a brief stint as a waiter, but quit.
So he was unstable, violent, and unemployed. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and he bought the gun he used at a pawn shop.
So easy to get guns.
Yeah, and there are reports that he blamed American women for his problems, and he seemed to be having a really hard time adjusting to life in America.
It sounds like he was just filled with anger and resentment.
So initially, they only charged him with the murder of the woman from the bar, and his bond was set at $500,000.
Okay.
They put him on suicide watch and kept him in solitary confinement.
Makes sense, given the circumstances.
Yeah, but once they realized how many victims there were, they added 5 more counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder with an additional $250,000 bond for each charge.
Wow, so he was facing some serious time.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy, but Yanni's actually reopened the same day as the shooting.
Really? That's so soon after such a tragedy.
Yeah, so Balasheb's defense was that he was not guilty by reason of insanity.
Oh, so they were saying he wasn't mentally competent.
Exactly. His lawyers argued that he had brain damage from repeated head trauma, and because of that, he couldn't tell right from wrong when he did the shootings.
Did that hold up?
Well, the psychiatric evaluations were actually kind of mixed.
Really?
Yeah, one doctor said that he had paranoid schizophrenia and even had a seizure during the shooting. But 2 other psychiatrists disagreed. They said he had antisocial personality disorder, but he was sane at the time of the shootings.
Oh, so they didn't buy the brain damage argument.
Right, and they found that his intelligence was normal to above average.
Interesting.
Now, here's where things get really interesting, legally speaking.
Okay, I'm listening.
In 1984, Texas law said that killing multiple people wasn't automatically a capital crime.
You mean it wasn't eligible for the death penalty?
Right, so even though he killed 6 people, he couldn't get the death penalty.
Because of a technicality in the law.
Exactly. So he ended up getting 6 consecutive life sentences, plus $70,000 in fines for the murders, and then another 20 years and a $10,000 fine for the attempted murder, all to be served one after the other.
So basically life in prison.
Pretty much. And get this, when they read the verdict, he was apparently surprised. He thought he was going to be released.
Oh, wow. He was totally detached from reality.
Yeah, and he became eligible for parole in 2004.
Did he get it?
No, but the case did have a major impact on Texas law. The next year, the legislature added a multiple victims provision to the death penalty statute.
So because of him, they changed the law.
Exactly. And he did try to appeal his conviction, but it was unsuccessful.
So he stayed in prison.
Yep, and this whole case really brought a lot of criticism to American immigration policy.
Yeah, it's pretty clear they messed up big time.
Right. How could someone with his history get into the country so easily?
It's a huge failure of the system.
And in August of 1985, the show 2020 did an episode called Passport for Murder.
I bet that was a good one.
It was all about how easily Balasheb was able to fool immigration and get into the U.S.
Wow.
And John McNeil, the guy who survived the shooting, he said there was clear negligence in letting Balasheb into the country.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And he and the families of 4 of the victims actually sued the Immigration and Naturalization Service.
What happened with that?
They didn't win, but their lawyer said that the screening process was inadequate.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, he said that just asking someone if they're a nice guy isn't a good way to figure out if they're going to be violent.
Oh, kidding.
And on the 30th anniversary of the shooting, the Dallas Morning News called it Dallas's worst mass murder.
It's definitely up there.
And there's a book about it called Worse Than Death: The Dallas Nightclub Murders and the Texas Multiple Murder Law.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it goes into a lot more detail about the case and the legal stuff.
Interesting.
And Balasheb eventually died in prison in 2017 at the age of 72.
Of natural causes.
Yeah. So, looking back at the 1984 Dallas nightclub shooting, it's clear that it wasn't just a random act of violence.
Yeah, it seems like there were a lot of factors that led up to it.
Right. And it revealed some serious problems with immigration policy at the time.
And it ultimately changed the law in Texas.
Yeah. The impact of that one night was huge. And it really makes you think about how we balance security with allowing people to immigrate.
Yeah, it's a tough question with no easy answers.
Exactly. And I think the events of that night in Dallas are still relevant to that discussion today.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we need to be vigilant and that our systems need to be as strong as possible.
Yeah, because the consequences can be devastating.
Like we saw in this case.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really fascinating and disturbing deep dive.
It has, and it really makes you think about the complexities of these issues.
Yeah, there are no simple solutions.
Definitely not. And I think it's important for us to keep learning from these tragedies and keep working towards a safer and more just world.
I agree completely.
So to our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And keep those questions coming.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.